Hello everyone, welcome back to This Week in Racing. Reddit's favorite neck-bearded racing man is ready to talk about this current week in racing because there is a ton of stuff to talk about, including IndyCar announcements, Roger Penske finally totally acquiring the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and it may absolutely shock you what he had to say pretty much the first thing out of his mouth. We're also going to be talking about some good things and some bad things about NASCAR. The good things are the Daytona 500 entry list, and the bad things involve pit stops in the standalone Xfinity and truck races. We'll be talking about both of those subjects. And I've even got a strange IMSA story for you, so let's get into it right away. Starting out with some IndyCar news, and it's a pretty surprising announcement that comes from Racer Magazine that Dreyer and Reinbold Racing, which has been an Indy 500 only IndyCar team since 2012, will be contesting a partial season this year, a 4-race schedule which includes St. Pete, the Indy GP, the Indy 500, and the round at Toronto. Stage Karam has been confirmed to be the driver at St. Pete and the Indy rounds, and it was also reported by Racer that they are working on a second car for the Indy 500 for J.R. Hildebrand, which would bring them back to their regular lineup that they've had the last couple years at Indy. A follow-up to the Kyle Busch Indy 500 saga. Robin Miller reported in Marshall Pruitt's great piece on Racer.com about IndyCar silly season and where everything is, that a fifth Penske car is not on the table for Kyle Busch. That comes directly from Tim Cindric, president of Penske Racing. So that obviously narrows things down quite a bit where Kyle Busch can go and what competitive rides would be available to him should he decide to take up the offer to race a Chevy car in this year's Indianapolis 500. I think the obvious place that he could go at this point would be McLaren for several reasons. Number one, they're a Chevy team. But more importantly, if you look at McLaren's past history, or pretty much their entire history since their return to IndyCar racing in 2017, more often than not, they have chosen very high-profile, very PR-friendly drivers and teams and sponsors to associate with. This would certainly fall into what I would call the Zach Brown wheelhouse for Kyle Busch to race a McLaren in this year's Indy 500. We're just going to have to continue to see how this develops. Did you know Ware Racing is in IMSA in LMP2? Well, if you didn't already know, now you do. And their Rolex 24 effort is going to be looking a lot different than it did at the Roar before the 24. Because IndyCar driver James Davison, who had intended on not only racing the Rolex 24 for Ware Racing, but also was rumored to have a Daytona 500 drive for that team in NASCAR, has been taken off of the driving lineup after racing or participating in a test for them at the Roar before the 24. But unfortunately was involved in an accident, and Sports Car 365 has this story where Rick Ware has been quoted that James Davison is out of the car, and there's a potential that he will be replaced by a current NASCAR driver. Now, Ware did not specify which NASCAR driver that could be, so that'll be interesting to kind of track in the coming days. But it's also interesting because, again, Davison was linked to a Ware Racing Daytona 500 effort. Is this still on the table, or has this relationship somehow gone south in a hurry? We'll just have to wait and see. Speaking of the Daytona 500, it looks like it's going to be a very strong entry list this year. Hey, the duels may end up mattering quite a bit this year, which will be a great change of pace over the last couple of years. David Reagan has a very short retirement on hand because he will be back for a collaboration between Front Row Motorsports and Rick Ware. We're going to be talking about Rick Ware, it seems, a lot in the coming weeks. But he is back in a Ford. Justin Haley, which is a nice announcement, will be racing with Calling Racing and a yet unannounced partner team for that Xfinity program to move up into the Cup level. And of course, Justin Haley is the defending winner of the last Daytona race, at least, not the 500, but he did win the rain-shortened race in the summer with Spire Motorsports. And guess who is driving for them? Ross Chastain in a collaborative effort between Ganassi and Spire Motorsports, which they actually had a big announcement with Kyle Larson as well. And certainly, Ross Chastain finally in a Ganassi car. It's taken a little while for this to take place, and certainly in the Cup Series after that loss of sponsorship through DC Solar last year. It's going to be nice to see Chastain finally get that opportunity that he kind of lost through no fault of his own last year, and in the biggest race as well. He will be running this collaboration in the Coke 600. And then it's rumored, but not confirmed yet, that Daniel Suarez will be entered in a Gaunt Brothers number 96 Toyota. But again, that is unconfirmed at this time. NASCAR announced a fairly controversial new rule, but then again, what else is new? This time it involves the pit stops, and specifically the pit stops at the standalone Xfinity and Truck Series races. Now the rules are, I would say, this is editorializing here, needlessly complicated, and they're going to take a lot of explaining, and I still don't feel like I have a great grasp on this rule. In fact, NASCAR themselves don't seem to be, since some of their rules are going to be announced later on, closer to the first standalone truck race, Xfinity race, etc. So this is what I gather from it. There will be a minimum pit time, which is yet to be specified. It's going to be similar to some sports car series where you have to stay in the pits for a certain amount of time. That is not a terrible rule because there's some safety aspects that could go along with that. They're also going to limit the amount of pit crew members that can be on a team and go over the wall. This is where the major cost savings is coming from, by eliminating kind of the human element from the pit stops as best they can. And then it seems like NASCAR is going to go with some mandated pit windows, specifically during cautions or stage breaks. It's kind of unclear how green flag pit stops are going to be affected by this rule change, or if there's some sort of a penalty for pitting under green. It's kind of hard to understand all of this. And teams will be limited based on the type of track that they are going to, on how many tires and whether or not they can put gas in the vehicle during the pit stops. Again, not a great explanation from me, I will admit that right off the bat. And I'm not really going to... I know a lot of people come to this channel expecting me to complain about NASCAR and their changes, and certainly I don't think this is a great change, mainly because the cost savings are at the expense of jobs that are in what is now certainly a shrinking cottage industry. And I always say this, and I'm going to keep saying it, and unfortunately some racing series don't seem to listen to this, is that I want racing to be more inclusive and not less inclusive. I want more people and more opportunities to be out there. Seeing the potential job market shrink is never a good thing, specifically when you're talking about a fan base and just a base in general with NASCAR that's shrinking at the rate that it is. It's unfortunate to see that there's going to be less people involved than already are, which I think many people who are just trying to break into NASCAR and the broader realm of racing already feel it's quite tight. Whether you can actually get in, certainly make it your job is even more difficult. And I would also say that if you don't like these rules, you definitely have a right to complain about them. I'm not one of those people who says, oh, just wait for the first race and don't complain about it until then, and then don't even complain about it because you got to wait till the second race. Now, if you don't like it, you should complain about it, because this is kind of the problem that I think a lot of NASCAR fans ended up in last year. They played the waiting game so long with the new package that by the time they were complaining about it around ISM time, you're seeing what's happening this year, where they're kind of scrambling to come up with a solution to the short track issue, the short track package, to try to make that better right before the season starts, when if you had bitched really loudly earlier in the season, maybe a better change would have been found. So if this pit stop thing doesn't work for you in any respect, or it's just they go to the first race and it's a total disaster, damn right you should complain about it, because we're going to talk about this in just the next segment, but racing series have to listen to their fans now. Again, the market is shrinking, and the core fan base is going to become increasingly important, and what the core fan base wants is going to become increasingly important. And if the series do not adapt to what the core fan base wants, they're going to die. So you should let your voice be heard. If you don't like a change, absolutely complain about it. Monday, January 6th, it became official that Roger Penske owns not only the IndyCar series, but the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And he was very quick to start commenting on things that he was going to change, planning on changes, and his vision for the future. One thing that is not going to change, however, is bump day. Roger Penske told the Indy Star in no uncertain terms, "We will not have automatic qualifiers for this year's Indianapolis 500. Though he did mention a way to enhance the time available for teams on bump day to get their cars into the field. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Penske also commented on the investment he's planning on making, not only in the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but in the series, talking about millions, tens of millions of dollars in fan experience investment, meaning at the track convenience for fans. One of the things specifically that was mentioned was, or has been rumored, not confirmed, that the legendary bathroom troughs are going to go away from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It's up to you whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing. But Penske also talked about that he will have more specific details announced 100 days from the Indianapolis 500, meaning in mid-February we're probably going to get a huge information dump of the things that are going to be coming and changing before the Indianapolis 500 this year. And Mark Miles talked even more specifically about the big changes that will potentially, and almost certainly, be happening for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway will be post Brickyard 400 in 2021. And by the way, Roger Penske has also reaffirmed a commitment to that race. He continues to do that, talking specifically because this was something that was hosted by the governor of Indianapolis when he was making all these comments, specifically asking some of the higher-ups in the Indianapolis government, please support the Brickyard 400. So make of that what you will. I'll talk about Bump Day here in just a second because I do want to comment real quick on some of these things that I've heard Roger Penske say. I am definitely encouraged. It definitely seems like he has not, and that's no surprise, he has not been sitting idly by since he decided to buy it. Clearly, he's got a vision and a plan for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Apparently, I've already seen pictures of them digging up things at the racetrack and making changes already. And these are the small changes, apparently. Apparently, there's bigger ones coming down the line. And the fan experience, I think, is an interesting one. Now, one of the things I always hear fans complain about are the concession prices at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Those are exceptionally high. Will part of that fan experience be taking a little bit of a hit in the profits to be able to lower those concession prices? Who knows? Outside of that, the bathrooms, I don't know. Again, it kind of depends whether or not you like peeing in a trough. Here's the big deal, and it's the thing that I have advocated for on this channel for the better part of a year, and it is the fact that Bump Day is safe. The fastest 33 cars are going to be in the Indy 500, and people are going to go home. And it doesn't matter if that's the top. If it's one of Penske's cars, they're going home. If it's the back of the field car, they're going home. It's not going to be discriminatory, and I think that is fantastic news. And I have to say, it confirms whether he got some polling data from Mark Miles or some other internal source from IMS, or he heard all of the fans that were vocally talking about this, or have been vocally talking about this issue being an issue for them, a major issue, probably issue number one, especially when Roger Penske took it over. That's the first thing Jenna Fryer, I think, asked him, and it was the first thing on many fans' minds. I know it was one of the first things on my mind, that the locked-in spots might be coming. It seems like Penske has changed his tune, and this was something I said as soon as Penske bought the track. I thought, it's no longer in his best interest. Sure, he's still entering 4 cars in the Indy 500, but that is somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 to $10 million. He's got a $300+ million investment in the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. If one of his cars goes home at a personal cost of like $10 million, it's a lot less of a burden than saying essentially that the practice and qualifying days mean nothing anymore, because you know pretty much who the 33 starters are going to be before any cars have hit the track. Bump day is a valuable day now to IMS, and the practice days once again are going to be valuable because they're going to be kind of just ramping up that hype machine, getting to bump day, finding out who's in the field and who's not going to be in the field. Now, some people looked at that second part of the Roger Penske quote where he was talking about giving teams extra time to get into the show. A lot of people misinterpreted that because he specifically talked about the major bumps of the last couple of years, which were Hinchcliffe and Alonso. Penske saying he would give special treatment to full-time teams, give them an extra attempt over a non-full-time team. I don't think that's what he meant, because I'm pretty sure there were quotes from team owners. I don't think it was necessarily Penske, but I think Ganassi commented on it last year, talking about how they didn't like the one-shot bump day and didn't feel it was fair. And I think that was even something I talked about. And certainly it was exciting from a television perspective, but if I were running things, I would definitely want the bump day to be the way it used to be, in the sense that the cars that are trying to bump their way into the field, whether you limit it like you did the last couple of years where it's like 6 to 9 cars that could bump in or out, or you just open it up and just have an hour session where everybody, it's just a free-for-all, and if you're in line, you're in line. If you're not, you're not. And have it that way, maybe guarantee 1 attempt, maybe guarantee 2 attempts. It would be hard to do that in an hour depending on how many cars you had. But there are definitely tweaks to make it more fair. And certainly, if you just go back in time, some of the systems that they previously used where there were 2, 3, 4 days of qualifying, maybe you want to look at that and go back to that so that if you miss the race, you definitely deserve to miss the race, and it wasn't just because you had a wheel weight wrong or you got the setup wrong. You can take the car back, try to adjust it, and try to get it back into the show if your car is truly capable of making the field. So from that perspective, I think, again, you can certainly tweak the bump day procedure. I don't think it's a perfect system right now. I think the main holdup that people like me and people like everybody else had was the locked-in spots. I don't think there were a lot of people who desperately wanted to see the 500 become more predictable. And this was something that I've been saying for a very long time, and it looks like Roger Penske is going to actually kind of follow that. Not saying that I had any influence on what Roger Penske's thinking, but my theory was always the Indy 500 is the one event that makes everybody money, or at least makes the series money. And the other 15 events don't. Those are the money losers. So my logic was, why would you change the one event that works, and then almost certainly you're going to hurt the other events that are already hurting? That didn't make any business sense to me. Maybe it made sense to some other people. I don't know. But it seems like that's the strategy that is going to be put in place. Don't mess too much with the 500. Try to fix the other events and raise the whole ship at the same time. I'm excited. There's a lot of things to be excited about in racing, just in general. It sounds like the Brickyard 400. The Daytona 500 is actually going to be pretty fun this year. I'm hoping it'll be a cool dual race. I know, again, they do have locked-in spots in the Daytona 500, but if there's enough cars, it certainly could be exciting to see who's going for those final, 4 spots? Yeah. That's what we tried to avoid with the Indy 500. I'm glad we did. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any comments about any of the stuff I've talked about in this video, let me know down in the comments. I've got a link to a donation page that was set up by Marsha Pruitt for Bob Varsha, who is suffering from cancer. So if you have any extra change, go there and donate to that, because Bob is one of the voices of my childhood and a great guy. So thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube, and I will see you in the next video.